Good afternoon. My name's Stuart Matthews, and I'm a corporate partner at Traz and Hamlins LP, based in our Exeter office. I deal with share acquisitions and disposals, and work with business owners and managers in various different businesses and entities on a regional, national, and international basis. And part of my job is all about being a point person to work with clients from the start of business through to investment rounds, through to eventual sale. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Neath of Old Mill Accountancy. Hi there, Mark.
Hi, Stu, thanks. So I'm in any deal, there's both a legal side and the financial and taxation side, and that's where we come in. So I'm a corporate finance partner here at Old Mill. We are accountants, as the name suggests. We get involved in deals, mainly working with owner-managed business, all in the West Country. And our role would be looking after the accounting side of that. So that's supporting on the due diligence. It's dealing with the financial and taxation aspects of the purchase agreement. Generally, helping to project manage deals and sometimes in negotiation. But in this case, the negotiation was led by the principal, which is Chris.
Chris, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, Chris, and your business and who you are.
Okay, very good afternoon, Stuart, Mark, and nice to see you again. Chris Ormrod, currently Managing Director or Chief Flavourista of the Flavourworks, a little known but ultimately very famous ingredient business based here in Wincanton in the heart of Somerset. Really, food business, that's what it is. We make food, and we make 2 million portions of food each and every week for retailers all over the UK. But I didn't want to be in food in the first place. I trained as an actor some time ago, but failed miserably in that profession. So bumped into a company called Mars, worked there for a couple of years, and then worked in a variety of various branded and own label food businesses before about 12 years ago, deciding I wanted to branch out and buy my own business, which I did, and then sold that business, and then bought and sold it back again. And on the way, did a few other bits and pieces. And then was originally invited by a private equity house who are putting together an offer for the company we now know as Flavourworks some 4 years ago. That private equity bid didn't succeed, but I enjoyed meeting the then shareholders and agreed to take a shareholding in the business, become the majority shareholder, and ran it for 4 years until our sale to the American food ingredient business, Griffith Food, earlier this year. So that's a potted history of us and what we do.
Yeah. So you've had a wide and varied background there, Chris, so you got into food after started an acting career. Are there any similarities between the food industry and your initial acting career, do you think?
You earn a lot less in the food industry than if you're a successful actor. I think there are some benefits to having gone through the ability to understand how to control your presentational skills. Particularly, my background, really, I started life as a sales rep for Mars, and I think there's an awful lot between being a sales rep and actually being an MD. There are many sorts of MDs, Stuart, and you'll have come across, I suspect, yourself and Mark, various sorts. And if a business is in a growth phase and wants to get out there and aggressively move itself, then an ex-salesperson or marketing person is not a bad choice. If it's reached a stage of maturity, you need to make sure it's being run efficiently, then actually, an operations director stroke MD is better. And if it's in, maybe a more mature phase, then hush this, but maybe an accountant might be better off running it. But, the best businesses are run by sales guys, I would hasten to add.
Definitely not accountants.
I couldn't.
We've known the Flavourworks, the Marcus business, for many years, and I have to say, when you came on board as MD, there was a real noticeable change in the way the business was directed, how it was moving forward with a clear growth target and a lot of ambition. And you brought a very different culture. I mean, not just. You call yourself Chief Flavourista, you renamed your finance director the Chief Bean Counter. A lot of changes, and the branding behind you as well.
It was, and it was deliberate, Mark. I mean, effectively, we're a B2B, as are you and as is Stuart, effectively. So you're in a world where you can be quite anonymous. And so what I wanted to do was bring all of my branding thinking, at the best of my branding thinking, to the world of a private own label business in the B2B world. And hence that came about. So, we worked really hard at making ourselves stand out, giving ourselves something that PR companies would want to talk about. Talking about the next 3 tons of garlic butter may not excite most editors' thinking, really, but if you can wrap it up with what you're doing and the culture you want to bring to a business. I spent 2 very, very good years working directly with Richard Branson when I set up Virgin Cola for him. There were 3 of us that set it up. And Richard taught me about breaking rules and about making a place fun to work for. And I don't mean fun in the unprofessional sense, but making it have a sense of humour, forgiving errors when they're being made, because 99% of them aren't done on purpose. Giving people enough rope to go and hang themselves. And I suspect I've hung more people here than I've done in any other business. And basically going with the right and enjoying it. And if people enjoy dealing with you, and I hope my customers do, then actually they don't mind spending more with you than with your competitors. So you try and make yourself the smallest kid on the block with the biggest voice. And that gets you into all sorts of places you wouldn't normally get. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to get more people to buy products that we make. That's simplistically what we're trying to do. And you can get your current customers to buy more, which is, I hate to say it's probably the easier part, but it's those hidden customers that have never heard about you and you've never heard about them. And they suddenly pick up on an article that they've seen. In fact, we had a customer visit today. And I said to him, where did you pick up on it? And he said, and he read just something which I'd done in a magazine probably a year ago. And it just happened to resonate at that exact time. So, Oscar Wilde once said, it's better to be spoken about than not to be talked about at all. And I'm right there with that. So, and it's, to be fair, I want to enjoy coming to work. I really don't want to come to work to a place that I don't enjoy being. I suspect a few of us have done that in our careers. And it's a miserable thing to get up in the morning and not really want to go where you go. So I want to come into work and work with people I enjoy working with, doing a job that, frankly, I love doing. I never thought I'd say I'd love doing it, selling garlic butter, but I absolutely adore working with the guys and the girls here and the products that we produce. It's really good, really, really good fun. And the food industry, remarkably recession-proof. We've come through some seriously bad time, come through pandemic, and we've come through still struggling with bits of it, but come through Brexit. And yet with all of that, I haven't laid a single person off. We've not made anybody redundant, and the business continues to show good growth. Yeah.
And that, Chris, was an intentional act on your part as part of developing the business for sale when you came on board. Obviously, like Mark, I've been involved with the business for almost 10 years. And I saw the changes that took place after the MBO in 2018, after you came on board. And that was a process you were going through to prepare the business for the eventual sale to Griffith this summer. Is that correct?
It is. I mean, let's be really clear. Ultimately, my job as a business person is to develop value for the shareholders. And as the primary shareholder, to develop value for myself in doing that. The intention is not to create, or wasn't to create, a long-term dynasty for me and the family, etc. So effectively, you are always running the business with one eye on an eventual exit of some sort. And you would like to think you can choose the people that you sell to. And sometimes you get the luxury of doing that. And other times it suddenly comes out of the blue and you hadn't even expected to speak to these people. And that's really what happened in this instance. I mean, Griffith Foods, we were using a corporate finance house originally to help sell the business. And we had spoken to a potential number of trade buyers and some private equity people. I was considering doing a secondary buyout to take out the other shareholders, when the Griffiths approach happened completely out of the blue. Now, at that point, and you made reference to it earlier, I decided, and it was a definite decision that we took, not to run with corporate finance advice in its truest sense, because I felt that actually the approach was fair, the valuation was fair, and the people that I was dealing with, fair. All of those are assumptions which may be proved, it may have been proven wrong, and who would have ended up with egg on their face. But my gut feel was that was right. And therefore, what I needed was a first-class piece of legal advice and a first-class piece of accounting advice. And so hence you two reprobates turned up, because I couldn't find anybody in there. In all joking apart, it was, relationships count for a lot in this world. And I've worked with both in previous lives before. And I would have to say, I look forward to working with you in lives to come. One thing I would say, and probably one difference, is the chap who was the predominant shareholder before me, who I is now a personal friend, the way that he was approaching selling the business, and I understand this, was based on what it had done, its historical earnings, its historical performance, and its historical category. And therefore, what he was effectively saying is, look at this business, look what it's done, and make your valuation on that basis. I took a slightly diametrically opposed view, which was because what had happened is history. What I wanted to be able to demonstrate to a potential buyer is what could be done with this business and what we were doing with it, and therefore where it could get to. Then that's interesting, isn't it? Because historically, people tend to look at businesses and value them on the basis of the historic earnings rather than the future earnings. And I've tried to sell businesses before on quite frothy future earnings, and it's not always worked as much and as well as I'd have hoped. But in this instance, I was pretty clear in my mind that this business had some strong growth plans, and therefore my absolute distinctive choice was to present this with, look where we're going, look at the evidence that my strategy is working, that our margins are increasing, our selling price is increasing, our customer retention is increasing, and therefore give your valuation based on a fair assumption. I'm not asking you to pay for the next 5 years' growth, but give me some credit that there's still some growth to go here as a result of what we've done. And the other side took that positively, and their valuation was accordingly made. But it still means you're flying without a corporate finance person when you decide to sell a business on your own. But what that meant was every day I spoke to the other side. Every day I communicated with them, and sometimes it was a great conversation. And there are times when you think, I've got a bit of news that isn't that great, but you know what, I'm going to share it because I want this to be seen as an open and honest scenario. And so I shared when we had a bit of a dip in sales. I shared when we had an issue with a particular customer. And you may well remember, Stuart, Mark, but most memorably, the morning where the pen was about to get signed on the ink document, there was an issue with a particular part of our infrastructure which decided to fall down at that particular point.
Yeah.
And I shared that. Now, I would have hazarded a guess that would have meant the deal being put off, put back, or stopped. And it wasn't. And I think that was the greatest vindication of the fact that between all of us, we were seen as truthful, straight, and had integrity during the course of that deal. Yeah. And that played us. And my intention at all times was to keep the deal on a friendly but firm. Nobody was going to push us over, and we certainly weren't allowed to be pushed over. But at all times, I think we kept that going to the point where even when I became part of the company that we're now owned by Griffith, they commented upon the process and about whilst it's never fully enjoyable, that it was a process they were comfortable with, and it had been run well. There was no big boy steroids on display.
No. And I think that is what sets this deal apart in many ways, that I sense this as well, Chris, and it is part of your leadership. It's part of how we all work together, that there was trust and integrity throughout the transaction. But importantly, I think the parties came to it with a collaborative mindset, working together as a team on the sales side, but also on the buy side. There was that communication, open channels, so that when, time is everything, isn't it? And when something like that happens, the day of signing, it wasn't a major, it was something that could be overcome within hours rather than a delay to the transaction. Perhaps, Mark, you could say a bit about your experience of doing this particular transaction in the context of what Chris has just talked about with the collaborative approach that Chris mentions.
Yes, because and you were talking about the buyer being sort of pragmatic and collaborative as well, and their advisors on the accounting and due diligence side approached it in a very similar way. So it was sometimes in due diligence it can feel like a bit of a point scoring exercise, with the other provider coming in with their list of 200 questions and 20 tax people who turn up to grill you on every aspect of your corporation tax and VAT and this, that, and the other. But the advisors on the other side were very much working in the same spirit that we were, of all trying to pull together towards getting the deal done for the benefit of both of our clients. It was interesting what Chris was saying about selling the business on the future. I think that probably is a bit of a function of your mindset coming at it as a sales background person rather than as an accountant background person, because an accountant, accountants tend to be quite analytical and would look to the past. But of course, the key to actually selling the future is that whilst you're going through the due diligence process, is actually staying on track with the forecasts. So there was the potential for, when there was a month where sales weren't quite as good as hoped, that could have derailed the process. But I think it's testament to the openness between buyer and seller and the relationship that you'd built with your counterpart on the other side, that it didn't scupper the deal in any way, or even cause pause for thought on their side. I think that it was the collaborative working on all parts helped get us there.
I mean, don't get me wrong,
the ceiling fell in.
The chicken licking moment. Yeah, I think. Listen, I wouldn't. I mean, listen, I don't wish to decry the role of corporate finance advisors. I've used them in the past, and I will certainly use them in the future. And I think they have an absolute valuable place to play. But like an estate agent, when you're selling a house, they act as that buffer between the car and the road. But in this instance, because it was a single approach from somebody that I felt I could do, then I felt we could run with that. So it was. It's, as I say, it's reflecting back on it. Were we running a process where maybe 3 or 4 companies were bidding for the business, and we had a strongly competitive process, then I suspect I would have happily stayed behind the shelter of a corporate finance house. But I also think I would have made sure that I was regularly at the forefront of some of the discussions and not default all of that to them, because I have in the past effectively let the corporate finance guys sell the business for me and just, had the report on a Friday, discussed it with the team and told them what to do on a Monday. And I think you end up one stage removed. One stage removed. And if it's your business and it's, this is not a corporate business I was selling, it was a personally owned business, it felt important to me to be at the front of that.
I think, Chris, from my part on the legal side, your ability to have a direct link into the buy side, your counterparts, and discuss issues directly, it saved so much toing and froing between the lawyers, discussing points and running through issues. It prevented return documents. It got to the nub of issues very quickly. And again, it's that sense of trust and collaboration which just helped grease the wheels, if you like, and get the deal done much more quickly. The other thing that I would say on the legal side, from my perspective, and this was key, I think on the sales side, it's all about people, isn't it? And what helped me as a lawyer, and my best deals have always been where you build confidence at the outset, because the parties believe the sellers are on top of things. They understand where everything is. They know where documents are. They've got all their documents lined up. And we had an excellent team on the data room and on the disclosure process, didn't we, with our team there? And that set things up as well, Chris, I think, with the confidence building on the buy side. They knew that you had your house in order, and they knew that when they asked a question, they'd get it chapter and verse and have the details. They were confident that they knew what they saw, and that there weren't any hidden nasties. And that really helped the legal negotiation to progress things without any sort of second guessing or people double questioning what we were doing. What do you think about that? Do you think that helped?
I was rather hoping to get all the credit for a successful sale, but sadly at this point, I need to pay due homage to the team that I had here.
Yeah.
Now, first thing, it was a small team, deliberately chosen as a small team. I've had enough trying to sell a business with a small army. I also had the luxury of my then FD, who knew that she, after the deal, wanted to retire. And therefore, we had a succession plan in place, which meant I could ask Michelle, and if you're listening, Michelle, yes, you did do a very good job. We'll now finally admit that openly, yes. So what I had the luxury of a full-on FD doing nothing but put stuff in the data room. If it moved, it got tagged. If it got tagged, it was in the data room. If it didn't move, it got put into the data room. Even the data room got into the data room. So effectively, we had, as you rightly say, Stuart, whatever question you asked, we used to pride ourselves on answering both the question and would second guess the question behind the question, and then Michelle would answer that as well. And very quickly on, and I think you got it as well, we had strong feedback that the data room was a strength of the negotiation.
Yeah.
Now, that's a real lesson for me. I've always seen the data room as just a bit of a pain in the backside and something to dump stuff into. What Michelle taught me, and I'll take that to my grave, is that you can never put enough stuff in the data room.
Absolutely. And critically, the data room was disclosed for the purposes of the warranties, which was a point to get in there early doors, so to speak, with the heads of terms, which really helps the process and helps the seller protection side of things as well.
Yeah, that's something you asked for, and I'd never come across that before. And so, I asked for it simply from the principals the day the deal was first offered, and they were quite quick to come back and accept that. Now, speaking to other friends of mine who are doing deals, that's become suddenly a feature of what most of my friends who are looking to sell business are asking to do. It seems to me entirely reasonable to ask it as well. There's not a hidden reason for it. Just as you say, saves a bucket of time, and money. But yes, that was good.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be said that the quality and comprehensiveness of the data room really smoothed the financial due diligence. There was very little in the way of additional queries coming back from the buyer's advisors. Michelle and Catherine together had done such a thorough job.
Yeah, I think what it did, didn't it? It felt to me that very quickly we were able to zone in on the 2 or 3 issues that really were critical issues. As we'll probably talk a bit about the landlord scenario, for example, things that came at me a little bit left of centre, but had the potentiality to derail it. There weren't many, but we were able to cut through to those things very quickly and spend most of our energies on resolving those issues that beguile every deal and will always happen, but we got to them quickly.
Agreed. Certainly helped. And also, we had multiple shareholders on this transaction as well, didn't we? We had to bring everyone with us. Sometimes, Chris, you might have found yourself between a rock and a hard place there with negotiating with the buyer, obviously with Mark and myself, by your side, but also there was the challenge there of we were bringing shareholders with us in your fellow shareholders that weren't necessarily as close to the transaction. So tell us a little bit about how you managed that or handled that process.
I think that's always a tricky one because 3 times now I've sold a company and stayed on with the acquiring business, and other shareholders have exited. So you could argue that there's sometimes a bit of a dual agenda going on. So the first things first is to acknowledge that and talk about it with your shareholders. Second one is I don't think you can ever, much overused word, you can never communicate enough what's going on. So I think we used to have a chat, didn't we, every Friday morning. We got together 10 o'clock every Friday morning. Yeah. You, Mark, the others, and Mark's pet cactus. Sad to say he's not on display today.
No, unfortunately.
Cactus doesn't come to the office with me because that would be weird.
But so every Friday evening, I would send a close of play email to all the 4 shareholders, 2 of whom were working in the business. And I'm roughly hour's drive home, I phone them. And what you find is that they very quickly relax because you're keeping them in the loop. I never, ever had an email saying, not quite sure what's going on, could you update me? Never had that through the whole process. All I ever had was, that's great, thanks for letting me know, appreciate that, if you need any help. And then that was it. And so, it wasn't every day, because every day you go through peaks and troughs, but at the end of every week, you can look back with the benefit of a bit of hindsight. And the only thing I'd counsel to anybody who's watching it who may end up doing this is be really careful when you try and put a timeline on it with the shareholders. As soon as you say, my sense is this deal will be done by the end of the next month, you are a hostage to a very unpleasant fortune. So because that's what mostly causes angst amongst the shareholders. And I understand that these shareholders are remote, they're non-execs, they're living in other parts of the country, they've got multiple other investments, and they're trying to manage what they're going to do. And you're saying the deal's going to happen next week, so they'll plan things, and then it doesn't happen. So they're, so I think you've got to be honest with them. So my natural state of mind is optimistic. What I had to do was curtail that and be just factual and a bit of guidance. But I think on hindsight now, what I probably wouldn't do is say my gut feel is this will be done by next Friday. And I was wrong by about 4 months.
Yes, yes. Well, these things happen in deals, don't they? And we were, as you will recall, we had our ducks in a row, but these things take time, don't they? Especially when you've got international buyers and so on, and large corporations. Funnily enough, we can be fleet of foot. As when you're acting with individual shareholders, you can be fleet of foot, and I certainly found that. Your communications on the drive home must have been effective, because when I did my legal reporting to the shareholders and seeking instructions, people were prompt. People, very clear. We kind of knew where the landing points would be, and people understood what was reasonable in the situation, and that helped us be fleet of foot on the transaction, where we're dealing with a large corporate buyer. Don't you think?
I think so. I think it's exactly right. It's exactly right. And it is,
Yeah.
as I say, sometimes, even though it would be I just stop myself about to walk out the door and think, I better just send that quick email, 2 or 3 sentences, and then it's done, and then they've got it. But I look at the trail of emails as they go from pure optimism to pure pessimism to absolute despair to back on pure optimism. And I must somehow, a bit like Rudyard Kipling, need to treat all of those imposters just the same and go along the road of it, because all the shareholder wants to know is the deal going to or not going to happen?
Yeah.
Is the price that's been agreed and therefore in their thinking going to be the price that's going to happen? And is the timing that you've suggested going to happen? Those are whatever's causing the bits in the middle doesn't matter to them at all. When do I get my money? How much is it? And am I going to get as much as you said originally? And by the way, as anybody who's listening to this will know, you've also got to run the day job.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson I've learned painfully over the last 14 years, that what you've still got to do is get a bunch of people in and run the business. And you also have to decide which of those people to take into your confidence, because you can't, with the best will in the world, and I don't care how confidential we think we all are, that one piece of paper left on the photocopier, that one door that's open when you have an unguarded phone call, the one extra visitor from the bank that nobody was quite expecting, another visitor from the bank that week. People aren't stupid. And so you need to carefully decide how you process that information within the business. And we took a decision early on to take some of the senior team into our confidence, to explain to them what we were doing. And that really did pay dividends. Now, it's not for everybody, and I wouldn't always counsel doing it, because some deals are much more confidential than others, but where you sensibly can, getting your key people on board, particularly those that you want to be motivated in the new organization.
Yeah.
That was a mission critical piece for us.
Yeah, it's always such a trade-off. A lot of seller shareholders are concerned and want to try and keep confidentiality as much as possible in a deal. But in doing so, you're effectively putting all of the burden of the due diligence and the legal process just on your own shoulders. Whereas, as you say, it's absolutely critical the business continues to perform and meet your target throughout the sales process, so as not to lose your value as you go along. You need to share the workload often, because it's too much for one or two people. And I've certainly been on deals where the owner manager or one or two shareholders have just been completely overwhelmed and have underestimated the amount of disruption it will cause to their lives, answering questions from lawyers and accountants and buyers and insurance people and bank managers and all sorts. And it overwhelms them and affects the running of the business. But as you say, then there's the motivational side of carrying along the people, and they feel they're part of it. For those who are going to be part of the leadership team going forward, and the real benefit to them having felt that they were on the journey.
It was. I took a very distinct and definite decision when I first joined Flavourworks, when I first met people here and said, this is me, I'm going to come in, we're going to grow. I was always very clear to people, say, look, but I'll be very honest with you, it's the shareholders' aim at some point in the next X years to sell the business. So you need to understand that. So if you're the sort of person who gets nervous, is worried about you, all that stuff, come and talk to me. But I can tell you my aim is not to sell it to somebody who will close the site down and amalgamate it. But we are looking for somebody who can buy, build and grow the business. And hopefully we've demonstrated that. And the new acquirers, because, and I think, fair play to them, they've agreed, to go for a long-term rent extension here. That significantly satisfies anybody who thought the business was going to be closed up and shut up shop within a few weeks of ownership. So again, I'd say that everybody must take their own decisions about how they do this. And I've run businesses where I wouldn't choose to take that approach. But I felt with this one, I just somehow felt here, culturally, I wanted this business to be open. And so nobody would say to me, Christ, I wasn't expecting that. I want people to say, oh, well, you always said that was going to happen, and we appreciate you being open. And that's generally the feedback that I've had. And
in my experience across dealing with many different owner-managed businesses, that's actually quite rare.
Yeah.
Very often the ultimate sale of the business is the elephant in the room, as the owner-manager is quite clearly approaching their retirement age, but the rest of the staff don't know what the plan is, and whether there is a succession plan or a sale plan, and if you don't have information, then there's fear of we're going to sell to a corporate who's going to shut the factory down and move everybody up country.
I couldn't agree more with that, Mark. It's exactly right. And the sharing of open information, being open about what your plans are, succession planning in a business, no matter what your size, really, is critical, because it helps get the house in order, which again is critical to getting the deal done that we've just talked about earlier. But I can understand why it is of concern to people that own businesses, because it creates uncertainty by talking about it. So there is this trade-off, almost a tightrope to walk. It wasn't really an issue, I guess, for the shareholders at the Flavourworks, Chris, so much, but I can imagine that it can be an issue. It is an issue for lots of owner-managed businesses that we deal with.
Well, we did, to be fair, we had a debate. I mean, amongst the shareholders, and there were people on the board said, I don't think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Typically, they were the rather more mature members of the board. The younger members of the board felt, actually, why not? Why not be open and honest? And so we're not going to sell. We're going to sell tomorrow. This is the amount of money, and this is what I've got. Those are all things that to a certain, but you can explain to people why you don't talk about that, and they're not stupid. They'll understand why.
Yeah.
But what they're concerned about, when I stood up in front of 140 employees in the car park the morning of the deal, the first thing I talked about was the guarantees that I could give them about the business staying, jobs staying, and the business continuing and growing within the Griffiths empire. And that was it more than anything else. Not about why we'd done it, what that was. It was all about what was in it for you, Flossie on line 2, as I would call it, and to explain to them why. And the mark of all that, as I walked around the factory a couple of times, the predominant mood was, congratulations, well done, this feels good.
Yeah, great.
And there were no, it's interesting, actually. It's the post-acquisition period, which we're in now.
Well, tell us, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The best laid plans, always, but actually until you are through that, until you've taken the keys to your house and walked in the door and to a new property, then you decide what colour you want to do the carpet. There are certain things that you can't work out until you own a business. So most people here would say, okay, Chris, what's the plan? And the honest truth is, right now, I can tell you broadly what I think the direction is going to be, but I can't tell you the plan itself. And that causes a bit of unsettlement. So actually managing the business through this 3 months, while we all get a bit like, as imagine when the First World War ended and both sides got out of the trench and went, so that's what you were shooting me with. I understand now, and have a look at my trench. It's much better than your trench. The way in which both sides approach that post-acquisition period, really, some of us get it wrong. You go in and say, you country hicks, that's not what I would do, or we don't do it like that. And some get it beautifully right, which is, explain to me why you were able to do what you did with your size organization. And we're experiencing elements of that within where we are. But overarching all of that is actually being honest with staff is, you won't know, because I don't know what the plan will be probably for another 3 to 6 months. But we're working on it, and I think you'll like what we're looking to do. But for now, carry on doing your day job. Explain to customers what the plan is, because your customers are pretty critical to all of this. And have a frequent. The obvious questions are: your customer's going to say, right, when do your prices go up, or when do I get the benefits, or what's in it for me? And have those answers ready for your customers. Staff first, without question. Customers second.
Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating to hear you talk through your take on the transaction. The going through the transaction, how you your involvement in leading it, and now the post-acquisition integration, which is obviously the critical aspect that you're in now. So how about you, Chris? Well, you know, is it too early for you to have plans at the moment? Are you working through this post-acquisition phase and see where you go?
Yeah, it is. I think it is actually. I mean, look.
Yeah.
I really have enjoyed, I'm not just saying it because they're watching, I've really enjoyed working with the guys from Griffith. They're a class act, and I think the business has landed spot in the right place for its growth, absolutely spot in its right place for its growth. Whether or not, you know, after I've worked through my period of time, it's a place where I want to be. At the moment, when I sold my first company to Greencore, I stayed at Greencore for 7 years. So now, yes, I then bought the business back from Greencore. So probably 4 of those years was plotting how to buy it back. I don't get the sense that will happen. I don't think lightning will strike that twice. But I enjoy running my own show and working within a corporate business, however pleasant they are, however enjoyable it is. Ultimately, it's not your place. And so you either decide, look, it's fine, this is where I'm going to stay for some time, or you think, I'd like to go and do this one more time. Or 2 more times or 3 more times. I suspect ultimately I will want to go and do it again because you know, I'd love to have been an actor, but I never got a chance to do it. So I guess this is me like doing Ormrod the sequel and Ormrod the sequel. And let's see where it goes. But I enjoy business. I enjoy the people I interact with. I enjoy the customers. I very much enjoy the sector I'm in, and I enjoy the friendships I've made in the Southwest. It's a great place to do business. And as I said, all joking apart, if we end up doing more deals together, I'll be delighted.
Likewise. And I would be remiss, Chris, if I did not mention your Business Leader of the Year award at the Business Leader Awards, which obviously...
Well, it's not like you have the trophy lying around or something, is it?
I wonder, Chris, does it happen to be anywhere nearby?
Oh, there it is.
Weight's a small ton, so I'm going to hold it up for 2 seconds, and then I'm going to put it down. But that was out of the blue. That was genuinely completely out of the blue. It was, and you know, in a year we've just been through, to be honest, anybody who's led a business over the last 12 to 18 months deserves that award equally as much as I do, because just for getting through the last 12 to 18 months, there's never been a more testing time to lead a business, never been a more satisfying time to lead a business. And never been a more frightening time to lead a business. So when the people that were in the category to win that award, you look at them, there are some mighty impressive individuals. Yeah. So I took that as actually, and it will sound cliche, that you can't be a business leader unless people are happy to be led by you. And so you've got 140 people here who I hope would understand that award's theirs equally as much as mine. But I've got a very good office cleaner who really makes sure every day that he gives that a damn good, that's his first job. If that's not cleaned on a Monday morning, he's fired. But I don't mean that, Joao, in case you're listening. But it was a nice to get thing.
Absolutely. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you this afternoon. I'm sure I echo Mark's sentiments in saying that. It's been really enlightening, a fascinating discussion on your take on doing what is a sizable transaction with multiple moving parts and a huge amount of work from multiple different people to get to the finishing line. And I'd like to just say it was an absolute pleasure to work with you and the team at the Flavourworks on this transaction. Mark, I'm sure you'd like to say something similar.
Yeah, I'd echo that. And it's very interesting actually to hear your perspective after the dust has settled and what you're now doing with the business, because one of the drawbacks with what Stuart and I do is you're very intensely working with someone right up to the transaction. You get to completion, everybody signs on the dotted line, drinks their glass of champagne, and then that's it. And we move on to the next thing. But the business, of course, continues, and you carry on doing what you're doing. And quite often we don't actually get to catch up after the event and find out how it was and what's happening in the future. So this has been really, really fascinating.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. It's been a pleasure to speak with you this afternoon. Okay, cheers now.